Most people think a single bad night of sleep just makes you tired. The scientific truth is far more terrifying. Research shows that just one night of restricted sleep doesn't just make you groggy. It literally rewires your brain's architecture, amplifying your fear center by a staggering 60% the very next morning. You aren't just exhausted. You are biologically incapable of regulating your own emotions. You lose the rational, top-down executive control from your medial prefrontal cortex that normally keeps your fears in check. But the real mystery isn't what happens the morning after. The real mystery is why we force ourselves into this vicious cycle in the first place. Let's talk about the tired but wired phenomenon. You know the exact feeling. It's 2 a.m. Your eyes are burning. Your body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. But your brain has suddenly decided it is the perfect time to meticulously analyze an awkward conversation you had 5 years ago. Why does your mind choose the exact moment you are most desperate for rest to turn into a relentless mental hamster wheel? It is the ultimate everyday paradox. We biologically require sleep to discharge the emotional intensity of our daily stress. But the presence of that very stress tricks your brain into maintaining a state of high, burning alert. You are trying desperately to shut down, but your internal biology thinks there is a tiger pacing at the foot of your bed. To understand why your brain sabotages you like this, we have to look at a hidden piece of neurological machinery called the HPA axis. Think of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis as your body's master stress thermostat. All day long, this thermostat releases cortisol to help you meet the chaotic demands of your environment. But just like the temperature in your house, this thermostat is supposed to follow a strict schedule. Mechanistically, your cortisol is designed to follow a diurnal pattern. It peaks 30 to 45 minutes after you wake up, giving you the drive to conquer the day. And it is supposed to decline to its absolute lowest point, a biological trough right around midnight. But this midnight trough is incredibly fragile. And right now, without even realizing it, your nighttime habits are completely shattering it. You are feeding your brain signals that keep the stress thermostat cranked to the absolute maximum. Let's look at the first hidden mechanism keeping you awake: cognitive interference. In 2017, a fascinating piece of research known as the Zoccola study looked at a behavior called trait rumination. This is that repetitive, past-oriented mental rehearsal of negative events. It's the late-night overthinking. The researchers discovered something mind-bending. Ruminating didn't just make people feel anxious, it chemically blocked their diurnal cortisol recovery. Replaying negative thoughts specifically predicted significantly higher cortisol concentrations at bedtime. But why? It comes down to your amygdala, the brain's primitive threat processing center. When you lie in bed and ruminate on your daily stress, your amygdala projects a direct distress signal to a tiny region called the paraventricular nucleus in your hypothalamus. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a physical threat in the room and a stressful memory in your mind. So, the moment you start ruminating, your hypothalamus releases corticotropin-releasing hormone. This forces your HPA axis to stay aggressively on during the exact phase it needs to be off. Imagine a record player stuck in a deep, agonizing groove. Every time the record spins, it replays the threat, preventing your biological thermostat from recognizing that the day is actually over. The threat has passed, but the alarm bells are still ringing. So, how do we forcefully pull the needle off the record? The first science-backed habit is a neurological hack called cognitive reframing. You must shift from rumination to reflection. Rumination is reactive. It's asking, why did this go wrong? Why am I like this? Reflection is non-reactive. It is simply stating the facts of the day without emotional attachment. The science shows that this simple shift from emotional rumination to objective reflection removes the threat signal, allowing the HPA axis to finally trough. But sometimes cognitive tricks aren't enough. Sometimes the physical body needs to forcibly hit the brakes. This brings us to the concept of vagal tone. Your vagus nerve is the primary component of your parasympathetic nervous system. It acts as a heavy biological brake pedal on your heart rate and your HPA axis, shifting you into a state of rest and digest. And scientists have discovered a brilliant backdoor to activate it. In a massive 2021 study called the Flow Presso First Responder Study, researchers looked at individuals with unimaginably high-stress jobs. They applied cyclical deep pressure to these first responders, stimulating their dermal pressure receptors. The results were staggering. This simple sensory input led to a 25% improvement in sleep quality and a massive reduction in self-reported stress. The deep pressure literally shifted their bodies from a sympathetic panic state to a parasympathetic resting state. This sensory reset activates a brain region called the nucleus tractus solitarius. When stimulated, it releases GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter that violently quiets the noradrenergic activation of your brainstem. It chemically forces your brain to calm down. Historically, psychiatric wards use something called body jackets to calm agitated patients. It wasn't just to restrict movement. The firm constant pressure provided a deep biological signal of safety, mimicking a mother's hug to restore mental tranquility. But you don't need a medical pressure suit to trigger this biological brake pedal. You can do it with your breath. A 2019 study by neurobiologists Andrew Huberman and Wendy Suzuki demonstrated the power of a brief, non-sleep, deep rest protocol. The second habit to quiet cortisol fast is the physiological sigh. Right before bed, perform a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Do this just 1 to 2 times. This double inhale fully expands the air sacs in your lungs, and the long exhale mechanically stimulates the vagus nerve. It is a biological override switch. It rapidly decreases circulating cortisol while simultaneously replenishing dopamine in the brain's resting state. You are manually pressing the brake pedal, but there is one final piece to this puzzle, and it has everything to do with what you are doing in the hours before your head hits the pillow. We need to talk about the master conductor of your brain. Deep inside your hypothalamus is a tiny cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is the master conductor of your biological orchestra. It keeps the peripheral clocks in your liver, your gut, and your muscles playing in perfect harmony. This conductor relies on external cues, called Zeitgebers or time givers, to synchronize your internal biology with the 2-4-hour day. The most powerful time givers are light exposure and the timing of your food. When you experience a mismatch between your internal clock and your external schedule, like waking up at 6 a.m. when your body is naturally an evening owl, you experience social jet lag. This chronodisruption throws the whole orchestra out of tune. But nothing ruins the concert faster than midnight snacking. Insulin and cortisol oscillations are deeply linked. When you eat late at night, particularly high glycemic carbohydrates, you are creating metabolic disaster. Your insulin sensitivity is naturally much lower at night. Dumping sugar into your bloodstream when your body is trying to shut down creates what scientists call mitochondrial indecision. Your cells don't know whether to burn the fuel or store it. This confusion leads to severe oxidative stress and higher inflammatory biomarkers, entirely destroying your midnight cortisol trough. The master conductor loses the beat. The instruments play out of sync. You enter a state of metabolic gridlock. This brings us to the third and final habit, chrononutrition. To quiet cortisol, you must build a tryptophan protein bridge in the evening. Prioritize a protein-based evening meal containing tryptophan, like dairy, nuts, or seeds, and aggressively avoid high glycemic carbohydrates late at night. Tryptophan requires a very specific metabolic context to cross the blood-brain barrier. When you get this right, that tryptophan promotes the synthesis of serotonin and melatonin, locking in your sleep continuity and avoiding the inflammatory gridlock of late-night sugar. Understanding these three mechanisms fundamentally shifts the cognitive lens through which you view yourself. Stop judging yourself for being bad at sleeping. Stop believing that your late-night anxiety is a permanent character flaw. You aren't broken. Your behavior isn't irrational. In fact, your brain is functioning perfectly. It is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed it to do, keep you alive in the face of a perceived threat. The problem is simply an evolutionary mismatch. You have been feeding your brain the wrong biological signals. You have been giving it rumination instead of reflection, shallow breathing instead of vagal stimulation, and midnight sugar instead of chrononutrition. The moment you realize that your stress isn't a life sentence, but rather a biological thermostat waiting for the right inputs, everything changes. You take back the control. By replacing rumination with reflection, utilizing the physiological sigh, and honoring your metabolic timing, you give your brain the ultimate gift. You give it the undeniable biological signal of safety. Because at the end of the day, sleep is not a switch you can force off. Sleep is a shadow that only arrives when the fires of the day are finally starved of their oxygen. If this journey into the hidden wiring of your mind changed the way you see yourself today, hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It tells the algorithm to share this knowledge, and it helps us uncover the next great mystery of the human mind together.